A political earthquake has just shaken the heart of the United Kingdom. What has unfolded in the past few hours changes absolutely everything, not just for the government, but for the very image of British stability that the world once believed unshakable. Keir Starmer, the man who promised to restore integrity and order, was handcuffed before stunned cameras, judges, and reporters. The images are circling the globe, and some say this was the moment the new United Kingdom began. A country divided, outraged, and on the brink of institutional collapse. According to sources close to Parliament, no one expected the net to close so quickly. The Prime Minister was led away by officers while still trying to argue with the judge, and the court, once a symbol of justice and formality, became the stage for an unprecedented spectacle. The international press speaks of a political implosion, and the British public, bewildered, struggles to understand how the man who presented himself as a defender of the law ended up as the accused. The streets are seething, and questions are spreading like wildfire. Who gave the order? Why now? And most importantly, what else is yet to come? The first images of the arrest seem like scenes from a film, but they are real, and every second amplifies the shock. Starmer, motionless for an instant, tries to maintain the bearing of a statesman, but the tension is visible. The lost gaze, the hardened face, the guards advancing in millimeter-perfect synchrony. According to accounts from journalists present, the silence in the courtroom lasted only a second before chaos took over. Microphones fell, cameras collided, and shouts echoed as the Prime Minister was led away through a side exit. Outside, the country erupted in reaction. Some celebrated the end of hypocrisy. Others saw democracy collapsing in real time. In less than 10 minutes, the video had become the most watched in recent British social media history. Twitter crashed, YouTube took down streams due to excess traffic, and even the BBC interrupted all programming. The scene seemed a cruel metaphor, the leader who claimed to fight the abuse of power being dragged away by it. And in the contrast between justice and public humiliation, the UK saw itself reflected, divided, vulnerable, and about to enter an era of total distrust. But what is really behind this lightning arrest? This is where the story becomes even darker and more dangerous. According to sources within the Ministry of Justice, the operation was planned in total secrecy, involving a small team of elite officers. No prior warning, no emergency cabinet meetings, nothing to indicate what was about to happen. Even ministers close to Starmer were reportedly taken by surprise as the news broke live on television. Leaked documents to independent journalists indicate that investigations had been underway for weeks, hidden under absolute judicial secrecy orders. The exact reason has not yet been revealed, but rumors are multiplying. Alleged misuse of confidential information, irregularities in public contracts, and even accusations linked to Starmer's past role as a prosecutor. None of these versions have been officially confirmed, but the silence of the authorities is the perfect fuel for suspicion. Every minute without an answer strengthens the narrative that something much bigger is at play. And the question hanging in the air is direct and terrifying. Did Starmer fall by his own fault? Or was he brought down by forces that never accepted his power? The political impact was immediate. A true storm hit Westminster. Inside Parliament, the atmosphere was one of hysteria and confusion. Labour MPs ran through the corridors, trying to understand what had happened, while Conservatives were already preparing speeches demanding immediate resignation. Insider sources reported that behind the scenes, Allied ministers were in tears, some speaking of an institutional coup, others of an inevitable end. The opposition seized the leadership vacuum and went on the attack. Fiery speeches echoed online, calling for early elections and denouncing a government without moral legitimacy. The Speaker of the House had to suspend sessions after shouts and insults crossed the chamber, a portrait of the collapse of British decorum. Meanwhile, journalists crowded outside, fighting for every microphone, every improvised statement. Tension grew with each passing minute. Political experts warned that the situation could escalate into a constitutional crisis if Starmer remained in custody for more than 48 hours. And the public perception was unanimous. The UK had just crossed a point of no return. It was no longer just a scandal. It was the deepest shock to British democracy in decades. On the streets, the country seemed ready to explode. In London, thousands gathered outside the courthouse, shouting slogans and holding signs with opposing messages. Justice for all on one side, no more political persecution on the other. It was as if two visions of the UK were colliding before the cameras. According to local press reports, police set up metal barriers in record time, but the crowd kept growing. Some sang the national anthem. Others called Starmer a traitor. There was anger, fear, and confusion in the air. Journalists described the atmosphere as reminiscent of the Brexit protests, but with an even more explosive element. Now it was the Prime Minister himself at the center of the storm. On social media, the conflict played out on a global scale. Hashtags like You Free Starmer and Justice for Britain battled for the top trending spots. The world watched as a nation accustomed to stability fragmented live. And in the midst of this turmoil, the absence of official responses only fueled public fury. Every hour without explanation felt like a blow to national trust. And the British, weary of scandals, began to ask, if even the Prime Minister can fall without warning, what is left safe in this country? Then came the silence, the kind of silence that screams louder than any speech. No official statement from the cabinet, no public declaration from the police, nothing. Only rumors spreading like wildfire through the corridors of power. According to sources cited by British tabloids, Starmer's legal team was caught completely off guard. They expected an interrogation, perhaps a prolonged hearing, but never an arrest. And as they tried to contact the detained Prime Minister, other names began to circulate. The media spoke of parallel investigations that could implicate senior government figures. Unconfirmed reports mentioned secret meetings in recent days between judges and prosecutors, discussions about possible international implications, and even alleged leaks from within the party itself. The feeling is that something much bigger is being covered up, a subterranean struggle between political power and judicial power. And the people, once again, were left out. It is this mix of silence, mystery, and indignation that is turning a judicial crisis into a battle for the very soul of the United Kingdom. As the government sank into uncertainty, foreign powers reacted with astonishment and calculation. According to reports in the American press, the U.S. State Department had requested urgent reports on the situation of political instability in London. The European Union issued a cool statement, defending the importance of transparency and due process. But behind the scenes in Brussels, there was more. Fear that the UK could enter total political collapse. France and Germany, in separate statements, expressed concern for institutional continuity. The most symbolic reaction, however, came from Moscow and Beijing, where state media displayed the arrest video with open irony, saying that British democracy has proven to be just an illusion. Russian press spoke of the moral disintegration of the West, and Chinese commentators exploited the narrative of instability and decay of the liberal model. It was the international humiliation of a country that for centuries had been a reference for order and tradition. Now, the kingdom that taught the world about democracy seemed unable to govern itself. And in the face of this, an uncomfortable question grows. Is the UK still seen as a power? Or has it become just a global spectacle of weakness? If you've made it this far, it's because you want to understand what's really happening. Without spin, without filters, and without the mainstream media narrative. So do this. Subscribe now and leave a like. This shows you stand for truth, for the kingdom, and for freedom of expression. Every subscription helps this independent work continue to bring you facts, behind-the-scenes insights, and documents that the system tries to hide. Because what's coming is even more explosive, and those who stay out now will regret it when the next revelations come to light. But the real earthquake was yet to come. Not in the courts, not in the cabinets, but in the heart of the British people. In pubs, churches, and tube stations, the talk was the same. Was Starmer betrayed, or did he simply reap what he sowed? The working class, who believed in promises of change, now found themselves divided between anger and confusion. Many on the right saw it all as the inevitable result of a government that had forgotten its roots, a distant cabinet, surrendered to globalism, more concerned with Brussels than Birmingham. According to emergency opinion polls released hours after the arrest, public trust in the government plummeted to historic lows, while support for the monarchy and traditional values soared. The UK, tired of politicians and scandals, seemed to be seeking refuge again in its oldest symbols, the crown, the flag, and the idea of a strong national identity. The people wanted answers, but they also wanted justice, and above all, they wanted someone to represent the voice of the ordinary citizen. And in this void, nationalist sentiment began to rise like a flame that no one seems able to extinguish. And it is precisely now, in the midst of this historic turning point, that I need to ask you for something very important. If you want to follow every twist of this crisis and receive the next bombshells firsthand, subscribe now and leave a like. This shows you stand for unfiltered information, for independent journalism, and helps me continue to bring you new data, behind-the-scenes insights, and exclusive documents in the coming hours. What is happening to the UK is not just a headline. It is the dismantling of decades of stability, and every detail that emerges seems to confirm that history is being written before our eyes. According to sources within the Labour Party, there is a climate of absolute panic. Emails are being deleted, lawyers are working through the night, and historic allies of Starmer are beginning to discreetly distance themselves. It is the oldest political instinct in Westminster. When the ship starts to sink, even the rats jump ship. But what many have not realized is that this case will not end with Starmer. Classified documents indicate that the investigation could expand to key government figures. And if this is confirmed, the collapse will be total. And as Starmer's allies scramble to cover their tracks, public pressure grows like an unstoppable wave. Civil groups are organizing vigils outside Parliament, demanding the truth come out. On the other side, conservative movements are planning marches in defense of traditional law and order. The nation is polarized in a way not seen since the Brexit referendum. According to political analysts, this division is no longer just partisan. It is moral, it is cultural, it is a war between two opposing visions of the country. On one side, the progressive elite, centered in London, who believe in global integration, institutions, and political correctness. On the other, the deep England, which calls for sovereignty, faith, and respect for the traditions that built the empire. And Starmer's collapse has become the ultimate symbol of this rupture. On social media, emotional videos of veterans, small business owners, and outraged mothers go viral with millions of views, denouncing what they call the greatest political betrayal since Brexit. The UK seems to be approaching a point of no return, and the sense of revolt, according to all measurements, has already surpassed the control of the interim government. the economic consequences began to appear almost immediately. The pound plummeted in Asian markets overnight. Investors fled the British market, and Bank of England reports warned of risks of extreme volatility. But what is most alarming is not the numbers, it is the climate of total uncertainty. According to Treasury insiders, political paralysis has already blocked essential decisions on energy, borders, and national security. The UK, which always prided itself on predictability, now lives an institutional nightmare. No one knows who is in charge, who is giving orders, who can decide. Meanwhile, there is speculation about a possible emergency cabinet, and unlikely names are emerging behind the scenes. Veteran figures from the Conservative Party, and even members close to the royal household, willing to intervene to restore stability. And if this happens, it will be the symbolic return of the monarchy as the anchor of a state adrift. The people are beginning to ask for precisely this: that King Charles speak, that the Crown take an active role and bring order where Parliament has failed. The image of the monarch, until now discreet, is once again shining as the last pillar of national trust. As panic grips London, a wave of patriotism is reborn on the streets. Union flags have returned to windows, bridges, and squares. Ordinary citizens, tired of seeing their country ridiculed, have begun to demand a tough response, not just about Starmer, but about everything that has brought the UK to this point. On radio and popular programs, veterans and analysts repeat the same phrase. This is not just a scandal. It is a symptom of decades of surrender to global agendas, of erosion of sovereignty, of an elite disconnected from the real nation. According to documents revealed by parliamentary sources, sectors of the government itself tried to prevent the release of critical reports on immigration and security, fearing irreparable political damage. Now, these reports are in the hands of the press, and, if confirmed, they could bring down ministers and expose uncomfortable ties with NGOs and foreign interests. The feeling is that something much bigger than the arrest of one man is underway. It is the awakening of a people who have finally realized they have lost control over their own destiny and are determined to take it back, no matter the cost. But behind the curtains, some see all this as part of a calculated plan, a power game played by the forces that have shaped the UK's destiny for decades. According to analysts close to national security, the speed of the operation against Starmer and the absolute silence of the authorities were no coincidence. Insider sources claim that classified documents circulated among prosecutors and intelligence officials containing sensitive information about government decisions on strategic issues, borders, international contracts, and even secret transfers for programs linked to the European Union. If this is true, the Starmer case may be just the surface of something deeper, a struggle for control of the British state machine. As the political elite battles, the ordinary citizen watches in bewilderment, seeing centuries-old institutions act like pieces on a chessboard that no one understands anymore. It is the collapse of trust, transparency, and sovereignty. And the more they try to hide, the more the people demand answers. The era of secrets seems to be over, and with it, the myth of British stability. And this is where we reach the decisive point in this story, the moment when the UK must choose between rebirth or total collapse. The arrest of a serving Prime Minister is something that transcends borders, parties, and ideology. According to constitutional experts, the country now faces its greatest test since the abdication of Edward VIII, a clash between legality and legitimacy, between the falling government and the kingdom trying to remain standing. Behind the scenes at Buckingham Palace, there are reports of discreet meetings between royal advisors and senior military figures discussing national emergency scenarios. It may seem unthinkable, But this is the gravity of the moment. The people demand firm leadership, a voice to unite the divided country. And as the courts decide Starmer's fate, millions of Britons look to King Charles as the last anchor of stability, the symbol of a kingdom that, despite humiliation, still refuses to fall. What began as an arrest has transformed into a collective cry for sovereignty, justice, and truth. And, whatever the cost, this cry will echo until the nation finds its way again.